The Stitch Edges tool is another way that you can stitch two NURBS surfaces together, except unlike the Stitch Surface Points tool that we talked about a second ago, instead of selecting individual points, we're now selecting entire edges, which will make the whole thing a bit more intuitive. Also, this is not a command or action. This is an actual tool that we invoke and select two edges, and boom, it works for us. So let me start off by creating two surfaces. So I'll start with a plane, but we'll make things a little more interesting. Let me add a couple of patches here, and I'll duplicate this. We'll slide it over. I'll center both of these up, put a little bit of a gap in between them. Now let me grab some control vertices over here on this side. We'll pull these up into the air like so. So you see one of these surfaces is nice and curved. That's some very pretty curvature. And then the one over here on this side is flat. And let's say I wanted to stitch these two edges together to make this look like one nice continuous surface. You can go under Edit NURBS, Stitch, Stitch Edges tool, and we'll go ahead and open up the settings. And it has tool settings, so you can choose what you're blending. First off, you can blend position and you can blend tangency. Let's start off just by looking at that. I can select one edge. I'll just make sure I only get one. So one edge and then another edge, and boom, they just come together. Now that is stitching just to position. Notice there's no tangency between the two. I still have a razor sharp edge where they meet, so if I deselect, you can see that edge. Let me go ahead and hide the grid out of the way, so we don't really need to see it. So let me undo that. I'll press Y to re-invoke the tool, and this time I'll activate tangency, and now we'll select one edge and the opposite edge, and now we see tangency in between the two. Very nice, very clean. Now you'll also notice you have these two indicators on the surface. These allow you to control how much of the surface you'd like to actually stitch. So you notice you can kind of pull that in a little bit. For the most part, you probably won't be adjusting those too much. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other settings on the tool. You have waiting on edge 1 and waiting on edge 2. By default, this is set up so that waiting on edge 1 is 1 and edge 2 is 0, meaning that edge 2 is going to move all the way over to edge 1 because it has the most amount of influence. If you set both of these up to 1, the two edges will meet in the middle. Samples along edge is kind of an accuracy setting. This is how many samples take place to figure out exactly how the stitch is going to take place. The higher this value, the more accurate your stitch, but do be aware of cranking this up too much because your stitch can start to look messy. So we'll just kind of leave that the way it is for now. Now, you can also cascade stitch nodes, which means that each time you run this tool, the nodes that are created will override any other nodes that you may have used. So it's very much like stitch surface points that we talked about before. And finally, we can keep the original. Now, if we use this tool, let's go ahead and select here. So now I see the two of those snap together. Let's come back over to our channel box, and I'll select one of the surfaces. Notice that a lot of nodes were created. We have our two stitch surface nodes, very much like what we had before. They have some new options than they did with the stitch surface points node. We also have two curve from surface ISO nodes and one average curve node. And what those nodes do is they basically create curves on the ends of the surface and then average their location based on those weights that you input in the tool so that they know which surface is going to move over to whom. So that's what those are there for. Now, under our stitch surface nodes, we have whether or not we are keeping positional continuity, which we had switched on, so I can actually kill that if I want to. And notice we're no longer matching to position. So we'll activate that. We can switch on or off the tangential continuity. Thank you. So you make that flat again, like so. We can control the step count, so we can kind of adjust the accuracy. Now, you probably can't make this out. Now, here you go. If you bring this too low, it says recommended number of samples at multi-index 0 is 12. So it's just telling you what it recommends you use. If you leave this at a default of 20, it's actually going to work out for just about any stitching operation you need. But as you adjust this, you'll notice very faint flickerings across the edge as it recalculates and fine-tunes. Again, you have a bias, very much like you had before. It's the amount of influence that the stitch has over the surface. And then you have fixed boundary, which actually works now, where we can switch this on, and you'll notice the boundary is no longer affected. Only the interior CBs are affected, which in this case, we do not want to do. So we'll go ahead and leave that off. And that's all there is to this tool. It's just a way for you to select a couple of edges and get them stitched together really quick. So that'll wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.